to TU0's Talks. TU0's Talks is a leadership podcast where we talk to military leaders and to athletic coaches to try to figure out how do we take care of people and how do we learn and fail forward.
Failure is an incredible blessing because it's an opportunity to learn.
The problems and the trials that you learn from, 99% of the time, it's not you that pays the price of them.
If anyone wishes to deny their truth or their soundness, the only direction which he can proceed historically is not forward, but backwards toward the time when there was no equality, no rights of the individual, no rule of the people. Those who wish to proceed in that direction cannot lay claim to progress. They are reactionary. They are not more modern, but more ancient than those of our revolutionary fathers.
Walking down the hall, and he pulled me aside. He's like, "How are you doing?" I was like, "I'm okay, sir. It's been rough, but I'm doing okay." And he said, "No, how are you doing?" And I remember don't cry, don't cry, because that wall was trembling, and I felt the floodgates happening, and he said to me, my voice is getting all choked up right now.
Make sure that you like and subscribe and get ready to check in with TU0's Talks. In this episode of TU0's Talks, I sit down with Aleks Ring, a no-nonsense forensic accountant and a tough-as-nails staff sergeant in the U.S. Army Reserves. We dig into her military career, the leaders who left a mark on her, and how she's always pushing for self-improvement and constant growth. Aleks doesn't just talk leadership, she lives it. She also breaks down her passion for counter-threat finance, and trust me, it's more intense than it sounds, and her fight to bring mental health issues in the military to the forefront. Plus, Aleks invites you to check out her own podcast, Not Your Average Breakdown, and to connect with her on LinkedIn. Hello and welcome to TU0's Talks. Today I have a special guest that I'm actually really excited about. I met this person on a deployment and noticed her right away on how she was just able to take information and how other people were relying on her. So now I'm excited just to see where she is and what she's doing. So obviously this is Aleks Ring. Aleks, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. It's going to be a good day. I'll be honest, we are actually taping this on 9/11. And so it was one of those ones I was like, are we gonna talk? Just because emotions run high on both sides. We definitely are thinking about the families. And so I just want to stop and focus there first. Okay, Aleks, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that introduction. First, I really want to thank you for considering me for your podcast. I'm very grateful for that. My name is Aleks Ring. I was born and raised in Serbia. I usually preface all of my introductions with that because somewhere along in this conversation, I'm going to lose my American fake accent, and then people are going to get very confused. Where is this Eastern European accent coming from? Born and raised in Eastern Europe, but I came here to the United States when I was 21. I call myself a proud New Englander. I claim Connecticut as my home state. And I am a forensic accountant by trade, not something that I expected I was going to be when I grow up. Certainly not with a fashion design degree that I brought here from Serbia. Forensic accountant. I currently work as an internal auditor actually for an amazing organization called Constellis, which I'm sure you and your military listeners are familiar with. And I am also a staff sergeant in United States Army Reserves. I am currently assigned to John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School, or SWCS, for Liberty, North Carolina. And I recently actually got married to a person that you had pleasure serving with, Helen Ring. And we recently moved to New Hampshire, which I'm so glad because we moved away from Washington, D.C. So
awesome. Well, that is great. It's funny because I think you received your forensic accountant degree from Purdue University. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. How did you get to Purdue?
It was actually through their military affiliation. So I joined the military in order to pay for my school. I started school because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I came here, I was 21. As I mentioned, I spent majority of my education in a fashion school. I have a bachelor's degree in fashion design, and so I moved here and realized that I hate it with passion, living in New York City and working in such a toxic industry. And so I was lost for a few years and I decided to go back to school, started off at community college. And through my community college network, I was introduced to the military and I got interested in forensic accounting very randomly as well, because our homework assignment was to watch The Smartest Guys in the Room. I don't know if you remember that documentary about Enron. And my
Oh,
head
yeah.
just blew up. Like, I was never exposed to anything like that in Eastern Europe, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to prevent fraud. I want to prevent like another Enron from happening. My advisor was actually a Navy veteran, and he was like, you might be a really good fit for the military or the FBI, because that's where you really get to, you know, provide a lot of impact for what you want to do. And once I graduated from a community college, I knew I wanted to go for a bachelor's degree. So I joined the military, and as I was ready to deploy in 2019, I just graduated from community college, and I was like, okay, deployment is a great time for me to start school as well, because you don't have a lot of things you're focusing on. Like, you're focusing on the mission, working out, and sleeping. Like, your life, I hate to oversimplify, because now that you're out of that situation, you realize how, you know, how serious the situation can be when you're deployed. You're away from the family and you're not always in the safest place. But for me, that was a very simple living, because I only had to focus on a few things. You know, you get up at the same time, you put on the uniform, you go do your job, and that's it. You have nowhere to go. You have, you know, no clubs to hang out at or go to the bars. And so I was like, okay, school is going to be a priority on this deployment. And so I searched for a school that was military friendly, that could, you know, accommodate me for while I was away. I was deployed for 11 months. In that entire time, I was in school, and they were very, very great. Accommodating me. You know, I was in a different time zone. I had to submit some of my assignments late, depending on the mission. I was traveling a lot over there as well. So it was a really great experience at Purdue.
Well, that's fantastic. And so my wife went to Purdue.
Oh, nice.
And so she would get mad at me if I didn't ask that connection. So I'm sure she says it to everybody, like walking down or someone's got a Purdue shirt on. She's like, boiler up.
Yeah, I
And
know.
you know,
Yeah.
but yes, very strong military background at Purdue. I was blessed to be able to speak to their ROTC
Very
time.
nice.
And so I love Purdue. Great school, great academics. And so
Yes.
very impressive to be able to get there and to get that done. So good on you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we met at a deployed location, and I actually tell my boys this story all the time. And so you are famous in my house
Oh,
because I tell them, when you show up, it doesn't matter what you do, give it 100%, work hard, and people will notice you. And it was funny because I actually didn't notice you. I actually noticed your supervisor, because there were times that I would go to your supervisor and I would say, hey, I need this information. And then they would be like, hold on one second, let me go ask Aleks. And about the third time, I was like, why do you have to go to Aleks for every single thing you do? And so that's what it was that really impressed me, was just watching the interaction. But it shows a lot of your work ethic. It shows a lot of your determination. So my question is, where did you learn that?
I appreciate that. That humbles me, certainly. I think you met me at a very crucial time in my military career, because when I deployed, I got this huge imposter syndrome because of the unit that we were with and the mission that we were doing. And I was made aware before I got to the location that I am going to be probably the lowest enlisted person on on the compound. And that was the case. So I wasn't the youngest, but I was definitely the lowest enlisted. I had to promote early, actually, to an E4 to be eligible for that deployment. And so I was a PFC up to, or E3 in the Army up to a month before a deployment. And so you get there, and I mean, I was surrounded by lieutenant colonels, 3-star general was coming in and out at any given week. And I think that imposter syndrome just made me want to work twice as hard as my peers, because I wanted to make sure that I get the recognition or maybe earn a place in my own head. Like, this had nothing to do with, nobody looked down on me, nobody berated me because I was a lower enlisted or anything. But in my head, my place wasn't there, wasn't supposed to be there. There were far more qualified people than I, higher ranking people, more experience. I'm this little immigrant in my head, who ended up deploying to this, great location with great people, for a great cause and a great mission. I wanted to make sure I proved myself. And I think you and some other leaders over there kind of noticed that, but it wasn't faked. It was very genuine. I was like scared, of failing.
And I totally understand it. I remember you were one of the lowest ranking, and a supervisor would go to you for questions multiple times. And so I think there's two ways you can handle that, right? When you're in a situation where you're clearly the lowest experience, you're the new person, and you're around some pretty high profile experts in their field, you can either go in the corner and do your job and only do what people ask you to do, or you can do what you did and like crush it. Like, go in and find out as much as you can, help as much as you can, and just embrace the opportunity and the mission. And that says a lot about you. I guess my question is, where did you learn that?
I think it's a mix of my background. Growing up in a Eastern European household, both of my parents were, blue collar workers. My mom was a small business owner. My dad, he worked at the crude oil refinery. And there is, like, when I think back, I grew up during the 90s in Serbia, or former Yugoslavia. That was not always the safest place. And so in the late 90s, it was a constant war zone. And I remember the war started in 1999, and the school stopped. A lot of things stopped. Only essential things were open. And my dad got up and went to work every single day. And the oil refinery was, high on the list for a target. It ended up being a target that they ended up shooting. And a part of it caught on fire. He was at work. He, lost partially lost hearing. And then the next day, he got up and went back to work at 7:30 in the morning. And it's like, now you think about that, you're like, that was some crazy stuff. But it was just what was expected that you do. They gave everything to their job, to the work, because that's what was providing for us. And I think I bring that with myself. And then I came here when I was 21. I came by myself. I didn't have a lot. I didn't know a lot of people. I didn't know anybody, and I didn't speak the language. So in order to work and survive, you have to do something right. So you not only have to make sure that you do a good job, but you have to make sure that you keep that job and that you stand out, because all these other people around you, they have US passports, they have citizenship, you're on a visa, you're on a green card or whatever. That can be taken away from you, especially because I joined the military in 2017 and I got my citizenship in 2018. So since 2013 to 2018, I was either on a visa or a green card. And so you have a lot more to lose when you know that tomorrow might not be, what was before. So especially in that time, the talks started about immigration, right? Like the immigrants are going to get deported, and and so all that became very real for me. And so I think from that constant fear of, like, you have to succeed here, Otherwise, you have to go back to Serbia. And for me, that was not an option. So I think it's a mix, of my upbringing and just the opportunities that kind of got me where I am in the States.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. Like you were on the line. So man, good for you. All right.
Thank you.
We look back at, and I think, was that 2018 or 2019? I can't remember.
2019 that
2019.
we went over there.
So I was back and forth multiple times. I just can't remember which one it was. Okay, so 2019. So it's been 5 years. Over the last 5 years, and I've been following you on LinkedIn, and so I was like, all right, we're just going to have this time where I get you on the podcast and talk about it. Over these last 5 years, think about a leader or a couple of leaders that have really meant a lot for you or invested in you, that taught you, and tell us about those people. You can mention names or not, that's up to you, but just really the characteristics of who they are.
I knew you were going to ask this question, and this is probably the question that got me thinking the most, because throughout my career, I had a lot of great leaders. I was very fortunate to work both in civilian and the military world. I don't know if you know, because we haven't really talked since our deployment, that I ended up assessing for the organization that we were deployed with, and I got active duty orders. So I spent a couple of years over there, which was the most amazing experience for me. And I think really to highlight the leader that invested in me was actually how I got to that deployment, which changed the trajectory of my entire career, military and civilian. And it was Master Sergeant Sage. I have to name her. I call her my Army mom. She was a leader that I was absolutely petrified of. She had this mean look. I was a young PFC, I would go to her office and I would stand in a parade dress, and she would never relax me. Like, you could stand there for 45 minutes in a parade dress and she would never say relax. So I just had this instilled fear, but also huge respect for her. And I got the opportunity. They were looking for some volunteers to go help out a mission in Texas. And so I volunteered, went there for 30 days. And she was one of the senior NCOs that went with us. And so for 30 days, I spent, almost every meal with her, because, we were outside of Fort Hood, Texas. There's nothing around there. There's like one family restaurant, and that's where we went for 30 days for our dinners. And she really spent time getting to know me, talking to me. I joined at 26, so I wasn't the youngest PFC that they had. And so she was very interested in my story. She loved that I was in school. That was like one of the biggest thing. Like, hey, you're in the military, school is free for you. So exploit that as much as you can. And so I was about to graduate from a community college, and I told her that I wanted to get a forensic accounting degree. And she really took time to get to know me. I didn't think anything of that, but about 6-7 months after that, I get a call from my NCO, and he says, tomorrow you have to come to the unit, you have to be in uniform, and you're going to talk to Master Sergeant Sage. And I was just like so scared. Like, you talk about a sleepless night, that's where it's at, right? Like, you're a PFC who just got summoned to the unit. You either did something wrong or you didn't do something. And so I show up there, go into her office, and she says, you're going on a deployment. And I'm just staring at her, because that's absolutely not what I was expecting she was going to say. And she says, I fought for you to get on this deployment, and you have to go. Because if you go there and you perform well, you will get hired. She's like, I cannot tell you who this organization is, and I cannot tell you where you're going, but I'm telling you, you are going. So notify your employer that, you're deploying. That's it. And so that was like a shock, right, that you just received. And later, because you have to assess for this organization, and at the assessment, these people told me, we don't want you. You don't have the right rank, but your master sergeant fought for you, and we don't have anybody else lined up, so you are gonna go, but you have to get promoted. Like, we don't take privates on this mission. And so she got me promoted to a specialist. And really thinking about that, it was a very small act for her. It was probably a phone call that she had to make, or an email or something. Hey, I have a soldier. These are her qualifications. She's the right candidate for you. But the impact that she had on my career, because I went there for 11 months and then I assessed and ended up, serving with special operations that set my career so high. And I got exposed to things that I will probably never get exposed as a civilian or in the Army Reserves. I learned about counter threat finance, which is like my passion. That is mostly what I focus on. And I would never, get that type of exposure. My current unit, TUC0's, they're writing a doctrine for counter threat finance, and I'm helping them with that. I'm a 92 Yankee. I am a supply sergeant as my MOS, okay? But mostly what I do is counter threat finance. I do a lot of advising. My civilian job, I obviously do internal auditing and a lot of forensic accounting. But all that is thanks to this one act of this one leader who recognized something in me while I was a young PFC, barely 1 year in the Army. And that's just such a huge impact that like they can't teach you that in school. It's a crazy story.
It is a crazy story. And, it's one that you don't hear a lot about, but it's funny because the more I ask senior leaders, sergeant majors, 2-star generals, and I say, all right, tell me about a person who made an impact, I can't tell you one officer that they've named. It's always been the NCO Corps. And I think there's so much pride in the NCO of mentoring young officers and then finding the diamonds in the rough for the young enlisted and just putting them in positions and growing them and investing and developing. And so Master Sergeant Sage just found someone that she believed in and said, hey, this is where I'm going to go. And if I could, she's sticking her neck out for you. Like, she had to really believe in you to say, I'm willing to put a young private in a specialist deployment with these types of people. So she really did stick her neck out for you, and that's what they're supposed to do. And so, man, what a great leader. The funny part is she was absolutely right. I can go a million years on why I love special operations, because they find people who have unique skills and use them for that. And
yes,
I just don't care about a piece of paper that says I graduated from X. I don't care about a rank. I don't care about anything, but can you make us better?
Yes.
And so, love that. Well, this is actually a really good segue. I love high performers just because it's such an anomaly and I can learn so much. You are obviously a high performer. If you were to meet Private Aleks Ring, how would you lead a person like that?
I think my unique military experience leads me to believe that I was led in the right way. That the leaders that met me as a young private that came to that unit in Middletown, Connecticut, spend time to get to know me and really kind of push me in the right direction, recognize my strengths, my weaknesses, and figure out what is the best way for me to get to the X, right? And I think that is an important thing in the military, because we speak a lot about leadership, servant leadership, and stuff like that, but we don't spend a lot of time mentoring people how to be leaders. I am an outspoken critic of how the Army does their leadership schools, because they don't really teach you how to lead people. And so when you find these leaders in these random units who really invest the time to get to know you, to get to know their people, their soldiers, and then push them in the right direction, because sometimes that's all you need, right? Like, you don't need beating over the head. Like, you just need to be pushed in the right direction. Introduction, networking, school training, mentoring, whatever the case may be. And then let them go do great things in the world. And they will always remember. Like, I always remember that master sergeant, right? I always remember the NCOs and the officers that made impact on my career, because it's what shaped me into the leader that I am today, into the person that I am today, because military and your civilian world commingles. You really can't separate that. And so I really think the leadership styles that I met in my early stages of the career were really good for me, because they really pushed me to go into the direction that I didn't know I needed to go, because those were not the plans that I had for myself. I was going to join the FBI and be a civilian, have a civilian career until I get to that point. And then one of a sudden, 2 years into my military career, I am deploying. And then one of a sudden, I'm leaving my civilian job and I'm moving to North Carolina. And it's like, okay, all these things are happening, right? You never imagine these things to go like that, but it's the leaders that took the time to realize, okay, this person can go somewhere if I just give them a little push and guide them in the right direction. So, a little long answer of that, but I do really think that the leaders that I met and I still work with made a great impact on me and led me the right way to be the person that I am today.
Yeah, no doubt. Just random question. Do you still talk to Master Sergeant Sage?
I do, yes. She's retired
awesome.
and lives in Michigan, but we still talk.
That is awesome. Okay, well, I think now I'd like to pass it back to you. Is there anything that you would like to tell the young leaders, or anything that you're doing now that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. The advice for young leaders or leaders in general, I would say constant self-development is the key to servant leadership. And it's something that we don't often talk about. We talk about training and mentoring in schools and education and all these things, but self-development is really something that also needs to be happening. And it's, you talk a lot about mental health on your podcast as well. And it's the same concept, right? Like, once you start therapy is a long-term thing. It's not, you don't graduate from therapy, you don't finish it. It's a thing that happens over decades, right? And it's the same way with self-development. You constantly have to be working on yourself. You have to learn new things. You have to learn AI. You have to learn the new trends in your industry, but you also have to learn things about yourself. You have to change your routines. As your career changes, you age naturally, your priorities change. And so self-development is something that's constantly happening in your life. And I feel like if you do that, you self-develop yourself, you know how to lead yourself. And if you know how to lead yourself, you know how to lead others. And sometimes I just see that disconnect in young leaders, especially, who sometimes we're taught that leaders lead by authority, but true leaders really lead by influence. And that's a huge difference. And really, to close out, I'm an outspoken person about leadership, about military. If anybody needs an advice, if needs somebody to talk to that they don't know or that they don't want to be judged by, I'm always there. I'm a huge mental health advocate as well, especially for the military. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Aleks Ring. Also, I do have a podcast as well. We talked about earlier, Not Your Average Breakdown. I don't promote it on LinkedIn yet, but me and my friend Claudia, we cover current events. We talk about politics, no taking sides. We're just explaining plain, definitions and kind of current events in the country. We're on all streaming platforms. And also, I do a lot of advising and consulting for counter threat finance, illicit finance, forensic accounting. If you need an advice, if you need any sort of help, please reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So I actually did not know about the podcast, Not Your Average Breakdown, and then I'm going to be watching that today. I'll put links down below as well. Aleks, I can't thank you enough for jumping on here. It has been really an honor to watch your career and watch you grow, to use that work ethic and that desire to make a difference for the military. And I guess we need to thank your Master Sergeant as well.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate you inviting me here. It's a huge honor.
Awesome. Well, for everyone, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I hope you did take some time when this airs. Will obviously be past 9/11, but I hope you take some time to think about everything that happened during that day. Just take time to remember and honor those who did serve and continue to serve. And if you are one of those members, either police, firemen, military, or other agencies involved in that, a sincere thank you from me, and thank you for continuing to carry the banner forward. So, well, from Aleks and I, appreciate it. Thanks again. And this is TUC0's Right, checking off.
Bye.